welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm your guest host, Dr. Gracie Christie, filling in for Catherine Hadro while she's away. Thank you for joining us. In this week's show, presidential candidate Joe Biden is denied Holy Communion by a South Carolina priest over his abortion stance. We have expert analysis from Catholic news agencies Edie Condon. A Democratic lawmaker refers to miscarriage as merely a mess on a napkin. We speak out. And this.
Often, women who find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy don't know that they have another option.
We bring you the story of Women's Care Center, a group of pregnancy care centers empowering women to choose life. But first, our top story: officials in Missouri conclude an administrative hearing that will determine if the state's health department can revoke the license for Missouri's last abortion facility. The hearing before a commissioner with the Missouri Administrative Hearing Commission concerned what the state health department described as 4 failed abortions and other violations of state laws at Planned Parenthood's St. Louis clinic. Planned Parenthood accused the state of trying to use the licensing process to target the abortion facility. The commission's ruling is expected in February of next year. The St. Louis abortion facility remains open, pending the ruling. Joining us now is Susan Klein, Executive Director and Legislative Liaison at Missouri Right to Life. Susan, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gracie, for having me on the program today.
Susan, what are some of the issues with this particular abortion facility?
Well, the St. Louis Planned Parenthood has had multiple infractions over many years, and our Department of Health has been following those. And in the last several years, they've had over 30 infractions that the Department of Health has reported. Over 70 ambulances have been called there, and our Department of Health has just really been following that facility because we know that women's lives are at risk there.
And what are some particular instances that your group has seen where this facility has failed to meet basic standards?
There's been some ambulances that have been called. Some have not been reported. There's been complications with abortions, and those have not been reported to our Department of Health. The last issues that really came to light are 4 abortions, failed abortions, where women had to go back and have multiple visits, follow-up visits, and multiple procedures done, which put their lives at risk even more. So because of that, our Department of Health refused to issue a license for them, and then the court has got involved in that and allowed them to stay open without a license in the state of Missouri.
While we await a ruling in this case, the Planned Parenthood facility is permitted to remain open. What's your message to Missouri women about this facility?
Well, we encourage women to go to any other facilities like the federally qualified health centers or our state departments of health. Those clinics are licensed by the state. They have oversight. There's good care there, and we just encourage them to go and get their care at a facility that has some oversight from our Department of Health. We know that there's safer care there than there is at this facility.
Supporters of Planned Parenthood have argued that the clinic is being targeted. How would you respond to that argument?
Well, our Department of Health watches over and has oversight, and they do inspections of all medical facilities in the state of Missouri. So they're not being targeted because, because they do abortions. They are following and having to follow the same guidelines as every other medical facility in the state. So our Department of Health is doing a great job in inspecting these facilities, and it's just, it's just something that is done every year. So they're not being targeted. They have said that, they are, but obviously if they've got infractions that are happening there, that what is happening at their facility can only be laid at their feet. They have a responsibility to the women that walk into that clinic, and our Department of Health expects them to receive good care, and they are not doing that.
And how can the pro-life movement best support pregnant women in Missouri?
Well, we have been involved with making sure that women get good information about what happens when they go in for an abortion. We make sure that people are able to walk and pray on the sidewalk in front of these abortion clinics. We make sure that our pregnancy resource centers have good information, they have good financial support. So getting involved with organizations like Missouri Right to Life, when we stand unified, we really stand to help women get the care that they need and be a voice for those who don't have a voice. So I would say get involved with us for sure, but there are other groups in Missouri as well, but Missouri Right to Life is kind of leading out in this, and we just encourage you to get involved.
Susan Klein, Executive Director and Legislative Liaison at Missouri Right to Life. Thank you for joining us, Susan.
Thank you, Gracie, for having me on the program today.
Joining us now in studio is Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications at the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you for being here, Mallory.
It's great to be here, Gracie.
Mallory, how would you respond to pro-abortion advocates who say that the facility in Missouri is being targeted, and why should it lose its license?
Yes, well, I think we just need to look at the facts. An ambulance has been called to this particular facility 70 times since 2009. There's been numerous violations, failed abortions, including one instance where a woman had to go in for an abortion procedure 3 times before they finally succeeded in taking the life of her unborn child. That is not safe, obviously, for the child, but certainly not for the women. And I think whether it's a Planned Parenthood or an independent abortion clinic, the fact that it is the last one doesn't mean that there should be less regulation. If anything, it should mean more regulation to protect women and children from these unscrupulous providers. And the Department of Health is tasked with protecting women going into these facilities. So I think it's on the State Department of Health to make that call.
Exactly. And if this clinic does have its license revoked, Missouri would become the very first state without an abortion facility. What would that signify to you about the broader pro-life movement?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a couple of different states that are in the same position as Missouri right now. Kentucky, for example, is one of them where there's only one abortion facility left. And I think that this is reflective of the growing pro-life momentum. State legislators are passing laws that are reflective of the values of the people that elect them, and the state executive branch, these state departments of health, are really looking closely at abortion facilities. Perhaps in the wake of Kermit Gosnell in Philadelphia, we've seen an increased look on the part of the states to say we don't want to repeat what happened in Philadelphia. So I think that it reflects the growing trend towards pro-life. All the gains that have been made culturally, politically, and certainly just us as a movement being able to better respond to the needs of women and children.
Mallory, in my own medical practice, I've had to adhere to strict regulation and oversight in order to ensure patient safety properly, no?
Yes.
Why are abortion facilities often ignored by regulators?
Yes, well, the number that comes to mind is, 18 years that Kermit Gosnell's facility went uninspected. The State Department of Health in Philadelphia said, we're not going to touch this abortion clinic. And it was a pro-abortion Republican governor, Tom Ridge, who said that monitoring these facilities would impede a woman's access to abortion. So I think that there's certainly politics has something to do with it. And when we have these pro-abortion administrations, they don't want to look into what their allies in the abortion lobby are doing, because on the political side of things, they can have come to rely on support from the pro-abortion movement. And the minute that they actually try and execute health and safety standards to protect women and children, they won't like what they'll find.
Mm-hmm. If the clinic doesn't lose its license, what do you think Missouri lawmakers should do to protect the health and safety of women?
Yeah, well, it's hard to imagine something more that Missouri lawmakers could do. They've done such a fantastic job really throwing in the kitchen sink to the bill that passed in the most recent legislative session. This is a very strongly pro-life state. They've passed a limit on abortion after 20 weeks, after 16, after 6. And disability discrimination abortions have been banned, and really a lot of that legislation is being tied up by the court right now. So I think that it's a wait and see approach to see how the court's going to rule. But one thing that state lawmakers perhaps should consider is, how do we address the fact now that Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby is setting up these regional hubs? For example, just across the border in Illinois, there's of course this Planned Parenthood mega center that's being set up. That's something that perhaps other state lawmakers are going to need to address, and something that even needs to be looked at the federal level. But I'd say that the Missouri state legislature and the pro-life officials in the executive branch are doing such a fantastic job.
Indeed. And I also wanted to get your opinion, Mallory, on another major story.
Yes.
A federal judge blocked Alabama's pro-life law from going into effect. What are the next steps for that law?
Right. Well, I believe now that the state attorney general has 30 days or less, I believe, to appeal that ruling and fight this. Now, Alabama, you know, a lot's been said about Alabama, but when you ask the people have had 2 opportunities in the last 18 months to say where they stand on life. Not only did the state lawmakers who were just elected in 2018 pass that very strong pro-life law that's in question, but in 2018 there was a ballot initiative where a majority of Alabamians voted to say, we're going to recognize the right to life for the unborn in the state constitution. So they've been very strong as a state, and Governor Kay Ivey, a very strong pro-life woman, she said that she hopes the Attorney General will appeal the ruling, and certainly we hope so as well, and look forward to seeing more action on that in the coming weeks.
Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications at the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another open season for the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, began this month, and we need the Trump administration to take urgent action, because currently insurance companies are permitted to collect an abortion surcharge in a single payment instead of collecting it separately. This is a misinterpretation of the law put into place during the Obama administration. It means the abortion surcharge is hidden, so pro-life consumers might accidentally pay for this coverage without their knowledge. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com, where you can send an email directly to Russell Vaught, Deputy Director of Office of Management and Budget, and tell him to finalize the separate payments rule. Again, another open season for Obamacare has begun, so the Trump administration needs to act quickly to finalize this rule to ensure pro-life Americans are no longer tricked into paying for abortion in their health care plans. Congress has failed to approve legislation to remove abortion from Obamacare, so we need the Trump administration to take urgent action. Here's how you can help. You can send your email message directly to Deputy Director Russell Vaught by going to ProLifeWeekly.com. Again, that is ProLifeWeekly.com, to tell him to promptly finalize this pro-life rule. Turning now to our next story. A Catholic priest in South Carolina denied Holy Communion to presidential candidate Joe Biden last week due to the former vice president's support for legal abortion. Father Robert Morey, the pastor of St. Anthony Catholic Church in the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina, denied Holy Communion to the former vice president, citing Biden's support for legal abortion. Morey told Catholic News Agency in a statement, quote, "Sadly, this past Sunday I had to refuse Holy Communion to former Vice President Joe Biden." The priest added that any public figure who advocates for abortion, quote, places himself or herself outside of church teaching. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Edie Condon, Bureau Chief for Catholic News Agency and a canon lawyer. Ed, thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Ed, when should a pastor deny someone Holy Communion?
Well, it's really up to the pastor to discern the situation on the ground. The church places a lot of store in the relationship between a pastor and a member of his flock. So there is, in a sense, some pastoral discernment that needs to be exercised, but there are nevertheless some clear, bright lines, and there's always a role for the diocesan bishop to have his own say in the matter.
When it comes to politicians who have taken positions contrary to church teaching, how should pastors respond?
Well, it depends on the level of church teaching. Different levels of teaching require different levels of obedience from members of the faithful. When we're talking about, for example, the right to life and the grave evil of abortion, the church is very clear that the taking of an innocent human life is something that every Catholic should deplore, and to dispute this is to doubt a teaching that rises to the level of, we say, credenda, that is, something to be believed with divine and Catholic faith, the highest level of teaching. Now, when we're talking about a politician, for example, there are questions around whether or not an individual parish priest should exercise that level of discernment over someone who's just visiting the parish, and for this reason we often have bishops weighing in.
Ed, did this pastor in South Carolina do the right thing?
Well, it certainly looks like he did everything right. In addition to exercising his own good judgment, which he explained, and the referencing of various levels of church teaching, including documents from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, there's a clear policy in place in the Diocese of Charleston, dating back to 2004, leaving absolutely no wiggle room for this or any other priest in the diocese, saying that any politician who's publicly pro-abortion who presents himself for communion is not to be admitted.
When someone is denied Holy Communion, what are the additional steps a pastor should take to try to bring that person back into communion with the church?
Well, hopefully these steps are taken before you get to the point of denying them communion. This is what it means when we say there's a level of pastoral discernment that hopefully, and it's not necessarily the case where a politician's visiting an area, but when a pastor's dealing with a member of his own flock, he should be meeting with them before they present themselves at communion, really working with them to try and stop them from getting to this point in the first place.
Some, like Father James Martin, have asked if a politician should be denied Holy Communion for supporting abortion, should they also be denied the sacrament for supporting the death penalty?
The short answer is no. This kind of thinking conflates two completely different levels of teaching in the Church. The Catechism of the Catholic Church under Pope Francis has been amended to reflect the fact that the death penalty is no longer admissible in our modern society, but the Church has in the past held that it is a perfectly practical thing for civil governments to have recourse to. This is a completely different level of teaching to the credenda teaching on the grave immorality of the taking of an innocent human life, which is what abortion is.
So it seems clear that someone who has publicly supported an intrinsic evil like abortion is not in communion with the Church. Why do you think there's so much confusion surrounding this issue?
Well, I think we have to be careful around the language of not being in communion with the Church. When we talk about a Catholic breaking communion with the Church, we're talking about a very particular thing. We're talking about either heresy or apostasy or schism. And those have a lot of separate criteria involved, and we have to consider things like, were they properly warned? Was the situation explained to them? Did they demonstrate persistence in their error after being, properly cautioned and having the matter explained to them? So I think it's important to distinguish between someone who's taken a position which is absolutely impossible for a Catholic to maintain, and then putting them in a different box, which is to say they've broken communion, which is a separate act of the will.
If there are pastors watching this who are trying to decide how to handle this issue in their own parishes, what advice would you give them?
Well, certainly the best advice anyone can give any pastor is know your flock. Again, as was the case for Father Maury in South Carolina, you're not always given the opportunity to know the person in advance, and you have to use your own best judgment, but this is the reason why many dioceses have policies in place, that in the end the person that a parish priest should seek support and guidance from is his bishop.
Edie Condon, Bureau Chief, Catholic News Agency. Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
When we come back,
the abortion rates in the communities that we serve drop dramatically.
we bring you the story of Women's Care Center, a group of pregnancy care centers empowering women to choose life. Stay tuned as EWTN ProLife Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN ProLife Weekly. I'm Dr. Gracie Christie, filling in for Catherine Hadro. During a recent committee meeting, Pennsylvania State Representative Wendy Ullman described early miscarriages as merely just some mess on a napkin. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Ullman, a Democrat, spoke against House Bill 1890, which would require the respectful disposition of the remains of unborn children.
An early miscarriage is just some mess on a napkin, and I'm not sure people would agree that this is something that we want to take to the point of ritual, either cremation or internment.
Ullman later offered an apology for the remark on Twitter, writing that her words were, quote, poorly chosen. As a doctor, I can assure you that miscarriage is not a mess on a napkin. It is the loss of a human being with their own unique set of DNA. Even a doctor who speaks in matter-of-fact terms would never use the words mess on a napkin to refer to something as devastating as a miscarriage. It's good that Representative Ullman reconsidered her remarks. I hope she also reconsiders her opposition to this pro-life bill. And remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com to send an email to Deputy Director of Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vaught, to finalize the separate payments rule. It is so important that the pro-life movement is there for women facing unplanned pregnancies. This week, Catherine Hadro brings you the story of Women's Care Center, a group of pregnancy care centers that have found a powerful way to empower women to choose life. Here is this week's ProLife Focus.
And we are thus honored to bestow on the Women's Care Center the 2019 University of Notre Dame Evangelium Vitae Medal.
What once started as a simple mission 35 years ago is now being recognized for the major pro-life success that it is. The Women's Care Center is a chain of pregnancy resource centers, first founded in a tiny blue house in South Bend, Indiana in 1984 by Catholic professor Janet Smith. In its first year, the center served 300 women. This year, they'll serve 30,000. I met up with the vice president of the Pregnancy Resource Center to see their Baltimore location and to hear more about their mission.
This is our ultrasound room. Oh. At Women's Care Center, we walk with women from the moment they find out their pregnancy until they send their child off to kindergarten. That continuum of care, that continuum of support and love and concrete help is very real.
With 32 centers located in 11 states, Women's Care Center claims the title of the largest and most successful pregnancy resource center in America. But the pro-life group ran into an unexpected roadblock last spring when their plans were halted by South Bend Mayor and Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. The Women's Care Center bought a building next to a new abortion center in South Bend and needed a simple rezoning of the property to operate. It was approved by the city council, but then vetoed by Mayor Buttigieg.
We were terribly discouraged and felt defeated by that. But within days, we got a message from the owner of the building across the street, 30 feet away, who said, if you want to open, you should look at my building.
They did just that and are now looking forward to serving even more women at that location. Placing the centers right next to abortion facilities is all part of the Women's Care Center's winning strategy.
Next door saves lives. And the reason that it saves lives is because often women who find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy don't know that they have another option.
The statistics are stunning. They are saving lives.
Not only do more than 9 out of 10 women choose life, the abortion rates in the communities that we serve drop dramatically. So in our home community of South Bend, St. Joe County, the abortion rate since we've opened has dropped 75%. That is real care.
But Women's Care Center is quick to share the real reason behind their success.
The real secret is love.
That's what's great about the Women's Care Center. It's so welcoming and so beautiful that when people walk in, they just automatically feel at home.
Catholic mother Liz Walls regularly volunteers at the Baltimore Center. She's seen firsthand the positive impact it can have on women who walk in these doors, where all for free they can receive baby clothes, diapers and supplies, counseling, an ultrasound, and attend parenting classes, which Walls teaches here.
My big message, no matter what the topic is just to encourage them in their parenthood. That's exactly what we all need as parents, is just encouragement. All the resources are out there, to find out information about bathing, routines, manners, reading, all the important parts of being a parent. But really it's encouragement that you can do this, we're all in this together.
It's even become a family affair, with her children also coming to serve.
I feel happy to support somebody and having them live a proper life and not having that ended so quickly.
Just feeling like you made help someone have a child or help them just get something, and like taking these clothes and putting them on racks, or taking diapers and like thinking that, wow, someone's gonna have this and they can dress their child today and they can feel like they actually have something for their kid and that they're gonna have a good life.
From the littlest of helping hands to the top executives, it's clear that this group puts women front and center.
When the culture might be saying, no, you can't do this. This is not encouraging you to do that. Women can't, experience a difficult pregnancy and come out on the other side. And the Women's Care Center is here to say, yes, you can.
That does it for this edition of EWTN ProLife Weekly. Until next time, be sure to reach us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or connect with us on social media. Just search for EWTN ProLife on all the major platforms. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.